Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Lynn Kelly, the Executive Director at New York Restoration Project, and welcome to our 5-season screening and today's Q&A. For those of you that are new to New York Restoration Project, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our work. We're a 25-year-old nonprofit nature conservancy founded by Bette Midler to clean up and green our city spaces. And today we own and operate about 52 community gardens and steward open space throughout all 5 boroughs. COVID-19 or not, access to nature has always been critical for New Yorkers. But the hard truth is that not all New Yorkers have equal access to high quality, safe, beautiful open space. And the communities that we reach are some of the city's most underserved. They're also some of the areas that have been hit the hardest by this pandemic, which to us has only reinforced the necessity of our mission. In addition to supporting our 52 community gardens, we collaborate with local partners, we build new gardens, we engage with those communities, we educate school children, and we help maintain 2 city parks. And our work stretches all the way from the Bronx to Staten Island. We believe that nature is a fundamental right, and today we are so proud to welcome landscape designer Pete Odolph, whose iconic public works are a testament to the value of beautiful urban green space. If you've seen the film, you know that Pete needs little introduction. He's an internationally acclaimed gardener designer and an author whose practice in the Netherlands is renowned for its radical approach towards planting and landscape. In New York City, for those that are local, I'm sure you're familiar with the Battery Park Gardens and also the High Line. And if you didn't get a chance to screen 5 seasons, I highly recommend it. We're also pleased to welcome Janice Parker today. Pete will be joined in conversation by Janice. Janice is New York Restoration Project's chair of the Chairman's Council and a member of our board of trustees. And since creating Janice Parker Landscape Architects in 1984, Janice has conceptualized and directed innovative landscape architecture projects for private and public clients throughout the world. She's been honored with multiple awards, often more than one time, and her work has also been featured in numerous national publications. As chair of our Chairman's Council, Janice generously gives her time, talent, and resources to service our mission, and we're grateful for that, Janice. I want to thank both Pete and Janice again for joining us today. I also want to thank our Chairman's Council member, Sophie Coven, for helping organize our 5-season screening. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you for all you do for NYRP. Before starting the Q&A with Janice and Pete, I'd like to pass the mic to our Director of Marketing Communications, Lauren Wilson, to quickly go over some housekeeping, tech, and logistics for today's event. Thank you all so much for joining us. Lauren?
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone again for joining us today. I just want to do a few housekeeping things before I hand it over to Janice and Pete for their conversation. In case you're new to Zoom, or just to clarify how we're going to be handling questions today, in your toolbar in Zoom, you should see a Q&A function. That will be how we would like you to submit your questions today. The chat is disabled just so that we can keep the Q&A to that one area and so that we can track everyone's questions. Janice will be monitoring that and including those questions as they come in as she kind of starts her conversation with Pete here. If for some reason you have any issues at all in accessing or hearing today's conversation, then you can actually email Michael Cady at mcady@nyrp.org, the same person who you RSVP'd with, in order to troubleshoot with you. We are, in the event that you missed some part of today's Q&A, we are recording it and can share later, but just let us know. I don't want to delay any further though. I'm going to hand it over to Janice, and Janice, take it away. I think you might be, let me unmute you here. You good?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And especially thank you, Pete, for making the time to talk with us and for making your film available to us. And screening it has been screening it many times myself has been a great, great pleasure. And I really am grateful to you for everything that you do in horticulture. I would just quickly say that I've enjoyed your work for years. And I like to think of it this way, that there are a lot of phenomenal, great trumpet players out there. people and musicians who have been classically trained, self-trained, who's followed many paths to mastery, and they are masters. And then Miles Davis shows up and he plays in a whole new way, and we hear a whole new story. As trumpet players and garden designers, we are also grateful that a Miles Davis or a Pete Oldove shows up, because they open up new opportunities, new horizons. Improvisation becomes broader, innovation becomes more interesting, and there are just more possibilities for everyone. It is truly groundbreaking, the work that you do, and I personally like to thank you for it, and so would everyone, I think, in the profession. So to start out, would you like to talk about, in the film, you mentioned that you've taken every opportunity to go outside of creating private gardens, and talk a little bit about what designing public gardens means to you.
Yeah, public gardens mean to me more. Let's say I started with private gardens and small gardens. We had a nursery. We grew plants for many years, and we started as let's say, if I talk about my life as a nurseryman, and starting again as a designer, which I was already when I moved to the place where we live. I think that we did mainly private gardens. And of course, private gardens is beautiful because you work for a family, you become sometimes friends and part of the family, but you're always restricted to the family and what they like and what they want for the children and what they want for the future. And I think when I first started to work in public, I noticed that you can give joy to so many other people. Let's say, for instance, the High Line, millions and millions of people that come to places where they probably never would go to, or see things or gardens that I would never have seen, or plantings. So I think that is the joy of working in public. It has a lot of restrictions as well. You're not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. It's about safety, and all your planting has to be more durable and more stronger. So I think that's a big difference. But the joy you have from what people like from your work, how they meet your work, how you can teach with your work, how you can just let people enjoy with your work and share your work. Yeah, that's nothing can compete with that.
So when you have installed these gardens, especially I think we can refer to the gardens in New York City, have you noticed that the surrounding areas have changed, and which public gardens you think have had the most significant effect?
Yeah, you mean by, let's say, if I say what we've done, the gardens of at the Battery, that is not my first public garden, was the garden entrance at the Toronto Botanical Garden. I think that was around 2000 or earlier. Then we had Millennium Park, the Lurie Garden. All the planting design was also by me. And then the High Line came in 2004 as the neighborhood wanted green instead of architecture. So I think that is why I became involved in the High Line. People in the neighborhood had a strong wish for green. And I think that is how the High Line came on my path. I think that is what you mean, or?
Yes, absolutely. And which gardens do you think that you've done in these urban environments? What would you say, which ones have had the strongest impact, or have had the most strength in the way they affect people's lives?
No, yeah. It's hard to say. I think the High Line, but you cannot. It's always hard to say when you say it's not. You cannot count the number of people and telling that is why the garden is so good, because if it becomes a touristic attraction, it's not about how good the garden is. I think a place like the Battery Gardens, downtown, also downtown Manhattan on the Hudson, that is more a place where there's more space for people to sit and to be in, I suppose. But it's hard to say, what is your best garden. I think they all fulfill a need in first place for the neighborhood. But if the garden becomes too popular, you get more people from outside your neighborhood, like in the Lurie Garden, Chicago. That is maybe a place where it's also a big touristic place, Millennium Park. So it's good that I one way it's good that the gardens are there because people from outside the city can also see work that they would never see in their own place, in their own where they live. So it all has its own sort of needs. But what is the best place and what is the best garden? I don't know. Maybe my own garden here at Hummelo is the best garden because I can still go in it on my own and enjoy it. But the best garden is not always the garden that is public. That's the garden where real gardeners come to enjoy it. I think that is the reflection you get when your garden is good.
You know, in the movie, in the film, there are so many beautiful scenes at Hummelo of people visiting and learning over the years. And I visited it in 2014, and it was just fantastic. And you refer so much to the atmosphere and the importance of the atmosphere of a garden. And how would you describe the atmosphere of Hummelo?
Yeah, we're in the middle of the fields, and we surrounded our garden with hedges that are immensely high and tall, so they really embrace the garden. So the garden becomes more a hortus conclusus, a place where you be on your own, while on the same time you can have a look from the office into the fields where you see the cows. So I think that atmosphere is maybe a different meaning as in America than here. Atmosphere is ambience. Mm-hmm. Where you feel good, where you really don't think about anything else than the garden where you're in or the place where you are. So it takes you off from all your daily sorrow or your daily sort of stress, and that's what I think is what a garden should do.
And I think the people who were able to visit your nursery when you had it and visit Hummelo were also very inspired, the same way that your public gardens inspire people.
Yeah, I think a garden can be very emotional too.
Yes.
It depends on what I say. It depends on your state of mind, and then how you and everything can come together, and that you feel very happy, or even more than happy, or it is like it's also a drug. So that's what I think. So it has so much more than just being a garden, or it has so much more than just looking at beautiful plants. It's a world on itself. So it's a landscape, a world, and so you can lose yourself in it. And that is what I try to do with making gardens in public. So a place where people can lose themselves and come in another state of mind.
When you were designing the High Line, the way it sits perched above the city with views of the river and of the city, were you, the atmosphere that you were able to create as you walk through there, was that something that you was absolutely intent in your drawings to do that?
Together with field operations, James Gorner and his team, we were just looking for different styles of garden, different experiences. So from woodland to open, to half open woodland into a field, or to more a native, native areas where most of the plants were native, and to more cultivated areas where you saw beautiful garden trees like the Coryscusa and other beautiful shrubs. So I think we try to create different along the walk, because it's not a real garden, it's a linear park. So you move from the beginning to the end, so you cannot circle around. And so that is why we wanted to create different experiences. So different gardens where you walk from one into another garden. And also doing that, you create surprises, because you can create let's say 1.5 mile woodland, but it can feel good, can feel beautiful, but it's nice to have a surprise of coming into another area, and that it opens it up into something different.
I think that when you were talking about the hortus conclusus, the surrounding a garden with hedges like you do in your own garden, and certainly the Lurie garden is surrounded like that, which really gives you a sense of being in your own world.
That's true. It separates totally from the rest of the park, which is more like the Bean, and it's a lot of spectacular bars. And I don't know, the planting was not always a main thing, but the Loery Garden really focused on plants, and that people could be in that particular area and see it as a garden or an environment on itself. And so it's a landscape within the city, in a city landscape. I think that is what the Loery Garden does. So the attraction comes by adding a layer on top of what you do, bringing something. It's also the context. So a city works stronger. A garden in the city works stronger than a garden in the countryside. You know that because there's so much green around you. And the garden city is mostly stone, what you see. So the green neutralizes a lot. Also, that is why.
It's absolutely magical the way that happens. When that moment happens and you walk into a garden in the city.
Yeah. But you have to be aware of that when you design. You are aware of many things. The context is one of the most important things when you start designing. So the use of plants and the scale is also important. A small garden is different than a big garden. So, and also the focus of people on plants is stronger in a park than in nature. Nature is a bigger environment where everything has a scale that you cannot get in. It's so a garden is more how would you say that? It's a concentration of beauty.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring up that you won the Prince Bernhard Culture Prize, and which had a very large award, and you donated half of it to doing small-scale green environments in cities and in areas that were underserved. And we, of course, at MYRP completely feel simpatico with that. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was, I think, 2014 or 15 that I won that prize. It was a big sum of money, and I had to donate. Let's say I could spend half of it for myself, and the other half I had to put in a foundation. And we created a foundation for which was called, translated, Green in the Neighborhood. So it was about development allotments that were empty for many years, that neighborhood could create a garden there, and they were supported with. They could ask for money to start. I think that is still going on. It's and I think I found it important because I saw so many places in the city that were neglected, that were looking. I don't know. It's not about the maintenance. They were dull. They were just about some shrubs. People throw trash in it, and I think that always was a big issue for me. That I think why do the people that live there nothing about that garden? But you're not allowed. I think that. So it's a city. So I try to encourage people to do more work in the neighborhood and they could ask for some money to start for tools or to buy plants. And I think that's what's still happening. And I think that's a good thing. And that's made me think of your project when you asked me to take part in your sort of Q&As. I thought it's similar, different but similar. It has the same intent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Giving people an access to nature, no matter where they are in a city, is and in their own neighborhood, not having to travel to get that.
Yeah, it's healthcare, I would say.
Yeah.
What you do in the city is healthcare. You let people do things where they're not what they normally couldn't do, because gardening is sort of what you say. It's bring yourself in a different world.
Yeah, therapeutic up here too.
Yeah.
For everybody.
It stimulates a lot, in your brains. So, and also in your happiness and feeling. So yeah. I think it's good. So I don't know why I like gardening, but I still like it. And let's say I came late into this profession. I was 25 years when I discovered plants, and since then I was just addicted. And I still.
Do you remember when that moment happened?
no, that didn't happen from one to another day. It took me a few months because I escaped my family's business and just started work in a garden center, just through different other let's say jobs. And then they asked me to work a little bit longer in spring and I started to work on the Department of Perennial department to make decisions. And then I started to do maintenance on the nursery, and that's when I started to buy my first book about plants. Because nobody knew, and I asked, what is this plant called? Nobody knew. And then I started to buy a book, and I started to order plants, and then I started to order more plants. Then I started to visit, so it came within a year I was hooked. So within half a year, yeah.
It happens fast, that's for sure.
Fast, yeah.
Absolutely. During the COVID era that we're in and the home quarantine, so many people are actually doing, I think, a similar thing, looking at gardening and looking at plants and wanting to get started and wanting to enjoy it. Would you have, when you talk to first-time gardeners or when people used to visit your nursery, what would you find was the most important thing to tell them, or what they asked you?
No, yeah, you cannot expect that people to garden as I do,
right.
With 40 more years, 45 and more years experience, and then also your own idea about gardening that makes it. But I always say, start where your liking is. So you can start with vegetables. If you have the affection with green, just start to make a little a vegetable garden in planters around. If you only have a balcony, and then start to buy some plants you like in a garden center. That is how it all starts. It starts with very simple and very ordinary things. So I wouldn't expect people to just jump into the big pool of extraordinary or rare plants.
I would agree. I think that most beginning gardeners do start with vegetables.
Yeah, I know. And then they see it's a lot of work. And then started with
a lot of work.
Yeah, but that's the fun of it,
Exactly. So we're getting some nice questions from the audience, and I thought, I might bring up, this is a beautiful one. Have you ever witnessed the moment when someone discovers the beauty of nature by viewing your work? And if you have, what was that moment like?
Let's say, how do I see? I don't follow people in my garden, so it's hard to say how people react. So I'm not walking behind them. But of course, the reactions are, and of course, over the years, it have positive reactions. And I don't compare nature with, nature is an inspiration, but I don't compare it with my work. So I take a lot from nature to make my work and to be inspired. But if I see the question, have you discovered the beauty of nature by viewing my work. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think I certainly see you.
Well,
I certainly see you in the movie with a camera in your hand most of the time, but possibly that's because you were filming as well.
I was just taking pictures because the moments were lovely. The best moments, I think. I take my camera with me. And I like taking pictures, of course, of the good moments. It's who wouldn't take pictures in bad moments? It would only show you the things in not. Reality is that your garden can look bad when the weather is bad, when the sun is harsh and so on. But that's also a moment that I don't enjoy it. So there need to be more and other circumstances to get that feeling. So it could be the sky, it could be the light, it could be the movement of the wind, it could be so many. It's not only the gardens, all that comes to it. So it could be the buzzing of the bees, it could be the sort of the butterflies that fly around you, and also that you discover that there's more than one bee species, that you see there's so many more. And I think that is also brings that sort of beauty up in you. Mm-hmm. So it's not only, it's all everything together. So it's a layer of things.
Absolutely. I think when you see the way the light and the weather and the, like you said, the bees and the birds, the cycle of life that goes through the garden,
Yeah.
can evoke sort of the passage of life for all of us in many different ways, the
Yeah,
birth and the death.
yeah, I didn't speak about season, but summer is summer, and then you expect color and you expect a lot of exuberance. But when it comes, when you're a month later into September, then we all expect the garden to be sort of decay. And I think if that doesn't happen, then there's something wrong with your garden. So I noticed, and that was something different in the past when gardens were just about decoration, that even in fall, the garden had to look full of flowers, and if October, the garden was cut down to the ground because, skeletons and seed heads were not interesting. And I think that is what I learned myself with people around me, that you should enjoy the moment in the context of the time or the season as well.
I think that's a good life lesson as well.
Yeah.
I think the focus on plants in all different times, and it shows your focus in the film, it shows your focus on them as you're taking the picture. I could see your intense focus on what was happening to the individual plants, in that moment of time.
Yeah, but also not the individual is part of a group, and a group is part of a bigger group, so it is, and part of a landscape that you create. So it is a good garden. You can zoom in and zoom out without any sort of boring moment. It could be as interesting to zoom in onto a plant, into a detail of a plant, and zoom out on the totality of the garden. That's all even important. But to do that is complicated, make a garden that has that.
And you're studying that yourself, aren't you, when you're looking at the gardens?
What?
You are studying that about your work.
I think a lot about my work and why it does to me what it does to me. That is what I do. I'm not contemplating in the garden, but I rethink things. I think about why does it do that to me, and if it does that to me, it probably will do that to another person as well. So the emotion of that environment, of that garden, is not personal. I feel it's something mutual. It's something that other people also feel, and that is what I notice, when people have seen my work, that they say, okay, they have a similar feeling I have.
Yes, I agree. We have a lovely question here that would be, have you ever come across a plant that behaves outside of your expectations in either a positive or a negative way?
You call it a beautiful question, but I don't understand it. A beautiful.
Okay, so a plant that is you expect one thing from this plant, and it does something completely different, either good or bad.
Yeah, but that happens many times.
Every day.
Not every day, but during your career, there's so many plants you like on first sight, and then they disappoint you after a year. They can be aggressive, they can be just short-lived, they die. Every second year you have to replant it. If you know that, it's not a problem. If you know that plant is aggressive, find another place in the garden or don't buy it, But there's so many things you have to try, that there's so many plants that look beautiful on first sight and are not, or don't look beautiful on first sight, but you notice that in the garden they are an important character that you can use with the other plants.
Do you assign personalities to your plants? I mean, do you think of them in that way?
Character.
Yes, characters.
Yes, form and shape and texture. So, and that creates a sort of character that, in let's say, an individual character of a plant, and that you can put together with other plants with their own character, and you can ensemble that or put that together as a sort of beautiful group, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, that's how I see it. So you can see it as personalities because they have their own behavior, they have their own sort of will, they have their own presence, they have their own sort of timing of showing up. So you can sometimes compare it with a stage play where you put your actors on and then just let them do their things, you know. But it's different, but that could be sort of comparency.
It's a beautiful way to think about it. So you can write the play and put in your characters.
Yeah, and then it's, you know, then it's a sort of play in time. So playing in time, in the context of time. So it moves and it goes around, and you can just, it's a choreography as well. So you have to edit. Sometimes you have to just say no, take you out. You're not allowed to grow further. And so all these things that, yeah, I think I have a sort of thinking like that, you know, that is.
Yeah. As basically as color and interest moves through your gardens in a way that's very unique.
Yeah, but also that I'm very aware of what is happening, critical in one way, sometimes not, but on the other hand, that I'm critical of my work and say, okay, this goes too far, this doesn't work, and that's what I would like, I will change. So it's also that it's never finished. Maybe that is also the strength of gardening, that you're never finished, that you always start with something with the idea that it will be finished when you've done it. No, when you put something in the ground, it's just the start of a whole new time, of a period in time that the plant lives or plays together with the other plants. I think that is
a whole new show.
Yeah.
A whole new performance.
Yeah, and a whole new thing. So it's very interesting to think about it. Also, it's a complicated material because it also has a sort of, you can imagine that some plants flower in a particular period. They flower in May, June. The other flowers in September. The other one flowers in April. The one loves shade, the other one is short-lived, the other one is long-lived, but it's aggressive. Then the other plant doesn't like dry, the other plant doesn't like... So there's so many components that you need to have in mind before you start making gardens. That's why I'm still making mistakes.
Well, that's fun. That's part of the fun of it too.
Yeah.
You know,
if you do it 100% right.
That's right. Yeah, no, nature always comes in and makes a little joke, right?
That's true.
It has its way with you. One person is asking, do you incorporate trees and shrubs in your gardens if you are thinking about having a long life of the garden?
Yeah, let's say what people know from my work is mainly perennial grasses and so on. So it's a stigma I have, but you know, I've created more woodland than in my life than just perennial gardens, to be honest, more surface in woodland, because if you have a garden of 14 acres, you're not making 14 acres perennial garden. So the 14 acres is divided up by the houses, the paths, the circulation. Then you have maybe a little meadow for animals, then you have woodland, and then the perennial garden comes at the end. And you never start, maybe in the city you start with perennial garden, but the high line is, if you look at it, it starts with woodland.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of shrubs, it ends with shrubs, and so on and so on. So trees and shrubs are, I would say, the skeleton of the garden, or the house of the garden. But sometimes, for more dynamic areas, trees are not allowed because, you know, they can give shade in time, they give stress with the roots to the other plants. So it's also, perennial gardens have their own sort of habit, is a community on itself, where trees are not so much in favor.
That's right. That's right. But it's certainly, the Highline is a great example of the mixture of all of it.
Yeah.
And
trees are just, I'm a lover of trees, so, but to be honest, I do a lot of trees, but it is always a question that people, you don't, and do you ever use evergreens? Do you use shrubs? Do you use trees? Yeah, I do all, you know, but everything in balance, everything in the sort of balance of the operation of the garden.
Well, I saw that at your own garden. I mean, there's a great mix of everything.
Yeah.
And I think that the trees and the evergreen shrubs and things that you use there are the anchors of the garden in many ways.
Yeah, now you have seen the hedges, but also I love beautiful specimen trees. So if one dies, I buy another one. Of course, my garden is emphasized on perennials because that was where we lived from and what we did. So no, nothing wrong with trees. So.
And again, they have so much. They change so much, and they change the environment underneath them, and they change what you're going to do. So it does give you a very long.
Yeah, a garden lives for a certain. When you start with a garden, you start with small trees. Then it's good to have a sort of dynamic space before the trees become adult. It can take 25 years before a tree is adult, or even longer when it's when you talk about oak or beeches. So to having this sort of very dynamic place in your garden, like a perennial garden, that takes it. It takes the start of the pleasure. So the trees are for your children, and so the dynamic part is for yourself to enjoy.
I would agree. It's a lovely way to talk about it. One of the questions that we got also was that you work with a lot of native North American plants. And what are some of your favorite ones?
Now, milkweed is one of my favorites. Amsonia hubertii is one of my favorites. Some of the grasses, Sporobolus is a beautiful grass, very strong. Pygnanthemum. It's a whole list. Of course, your pieweed, all this Asclepias, name it. Veronicastum, Veronicas. The whole list. Not I have to bring them up during the conversation would be a little bit stressful, but
don't worry about it. I think that it's a wonderful. I love that you say that you're not trying to do the natural, but the natural inspires you.
Yeah, no, of course I use. It depends on. I work on the Delaware Botanical Garden, and we use 70% native plants because that fits in the context of a very natural place. So it's a creek with woodland, and so it's grassland. So the highline is different. So you can just create different. It's the middle of the city, so everything you do is with green is good. So we try to do the most by making so many different gardens. But sometimes it's half-half. But most of what I like in American species is they're strong, reliable. They are beautiful. They're great plants. So, and of course our European plants, or from our area, their flowering period is mainly in early summer. Spring, early summer. So all the meadows till June, July. Then it's over. So we benefit from the American species, even in Europe, where we have the Helenium, the pieweed, and all this Vernonias, Amsonias. So we extend our garden season with your American natives now. Huh?
Yeah, that's good. That's very good. It's a nice little cross-reference there. The plants traveling back and forth.
And also Asian like Actias, and so there's so much to say about what you use and where you use it and what. But I think, the benefit of American natives is that they flower from summer till late summer, which is very good for all your insect life here in the garden.
Absolutely. So what have you got? We were speaking a little bit about some gardens that you're working on currently, despite the fact that there has been a lockdown, obviously, on your ability to travel. And I'm sure that's affected you, but the gardens are continuing to be built.
Yeah. No, yeah, we let's say I built up a big network for people in Chicago that helped me out in the early 2000s, with the Millennium Park. And I think we made friends, and they're all plant people, and some are really good designers, so they know. And they helped me and implement already several gardens in the US when I couldn't come over, because then I come over just to oversee or to check it. And that's the benefit of having these friends where you shared all your knowledge with, that they can take a lead in implementing a planting. And that is what happened this spring with, in Milwaukee, we did a garden in Long Island, and we finished the garden. So we did, so we did four implementations or planting projects without being there. I don't know if it all went well, but at least.
Well, you'll find out, I'm sure.
No, but I trust them that I don't worry too much. And of course, we communicate a lot. And I think the same here in the Netherlands, we had a project in Switzerland and also in Germany, south of Germany. We were not allowed to travel there. And that was also done by a good friend of mine who's more than plants, excellent plants person. Also a designer, is landscape architect. So, we can communicate, we show it, we discuss everything in front, before, go to the drawings, and I have a good schedule how to lay out plants and how to do it. And my drawings are rather really accurate. So, that's good that I make not a list of plants that I want to use. Now I just make the drawings with all the numbers with the plants, and all the areas are just worked out. So that is good.
Yeah, it's very good. Helpful for the planning and the purchasing, correct? So it works out very well. If you think back on what you've done and what you've learned in your life, what would you like to be your legacy?
My legacy. Okay, that people enjoy it. Still have that I brought something into the gardening world that will last forever. That is probably what everyone would like. But I hope that I've lived in an era that we could change things in gardening or change people's mind in how to garden, and that I would say that would be nice if that is my legacy.
Well, I think it is already, for sure.
But that's what you mean, yeah. That's what you mean.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's why you do it for, everyone who's creative wants to bring something that people love and like and want to keep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What children throw away. What your children will throw away later, that's
Well, I think also opening the doors for people to see things in a new way and to design in a new way and to understand, especially that, when you touched on ornamentation, that gardens can be true to the seasons. And you see that in your film so much. They can be in decay. They can be, dormant in winter. And there is such an effort and a pressure to do ornamental horticulture.
Yeah, I think you have to, you have to learn to look different. I could see gardening as housekeeping. That every leaf had to move out of the pot. Everything had to be swept. And I think that flower had to be cut. And that plant had to be removed and be replaced with a pot with a plant in it. So that was gardening. But I think that is what we achieved. That gardening now is more an experience of beauty that is not seen as beauty in the past. And I think that's what we have achieved with just bringing this into the world by not only me, but with the books, with all the sort of publications. I think the media is very strong. It's very strong in bringing some into a public, that, and we were always sharing with everyone what we did.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think that when you have a garden like the Highline and you have gardens like the Lurie Garden that people visit as a tourist attraction, they recognize the difference between that and a formal public garden. And it does change people's view. And that's a gigantic legacy.
But also what you see is that people take it for granted, that they think, oh, it's normal, you can find it everywhere. So Okay. While those gardens are very unique, like the Lourdes Garden, Battery Gardens, every garden I did that is still worth visiting is good because you have a gardening team that takes care of it. You know, it's about stewardship, about taking care. It's about making gardens is not a problem, you know, but taking care and keep them going. Like in the Lourdes Garden, that is the garden is almost 17, 18 years old, you know, and the planting is still good. But it moved from one stage into another stage, into a more garden that is completely different from the beginning. But if you have the right gardeners, then it is allowed to happen, you know, as long as the aesthetics, the value, and the garden speaks to you. That for me is the reason to make a garden or to start a garden.
And understanding that future and planning for it is so important.
Yeah, and nothing has to stay the same. That's what I say. And I think that is also with gardening. It has to evolve into, you know, another year and another year. And you have to watch it and to take action when necessary. And that happens at the Battery, that happens at the Lourdes Garden, and that happens of course on the High Line. And we are now busy in Detroit, you know, with this beautiful project along the river and in Belle Isle. And I think that people are so the same. They have the same sort of eager to make something for the public.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, for me, most important, you know, create places with people and that people take care of it.
And I think that the lesson of the change and accepting the change is one that, you know, we're learning globally with COVID and the changes that are happening at warp speed for all of us in every way. You know, I think is a very healthy thing to recognize that change is important and not try to keep things the same.
No, everything is changed constantly, but you know, that's what it is. But you learn that it takes a long time to learn that, you know, for some people. To accept it, to be honest.
To accept it.
To accept it.
Yeah.
You can't learn it, huh? I think so you learn to accept it. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I think that's maturing.
Yeah.
Janice and Pete, I just wanted to chime in real quickly to say I think we have time for about a couple more questions. So if you want to choose some from the list, we'll have a couple more here before we have to sign off for today.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you maintain your garden? It would be great to know how it is typically done.
Yeah, we have the normal our gardens. Let's say most of the plants cover ground, so where the plants are, the weeds can only be something that interferes in the plant itself. But of course, we have maintenance. We have to take care of every open space till half June. You know, then because every winter we start with. We cut back the garden, and there's always open space, although you don't think it is there when you look in the garden now. But because a lot of plants are they are clump forming because they are not so aggressive and stay put. So that's what we try to do. Also, garden with plants that are not covering your ground within 2 years. So there's always open space where weeds can come in, and we have to take them out. So maintenance. Of course, it's much less than a traditional garden, but yeah. But, I cannot say how much time we spend, but enough time to keep it clean.
And over time, even with the clump forming plants, you find that the ground does stay open, and if you cut everything back, you'll find.
Say if I talk about some grasses like Sporobulus, there's always a little open space. It's not that much can grow in there. But if I look at other plants, yeah, there's always open space. We have the stagis with so many plants that are just clump next to a clump next to a clump, but there's always open space, and they never grow like a mat. Some plants do, but many don't. But then, but in general, if I have a big group of Joe Pye weed, there's no weed that dare to come in it. You know, that's always free of weeds. But that's, you know, a garden has maintenance. You know, you cannot go around it.
That's right. That's right. Well, we all know what a low maintenance garden looks like, a parking lot with weeds.
Yeah, and now some plants after 10 years became too big. So today we were digging out half of those big plants. So there's a big open space which you can fill in with other plants, and that's what we're going to do. But that are also, when you work in the garden, you create space for seedlings or for even your own plants that you like. They're not allowed to seed everywhere. You know that, because then you lose the sort of the design intent. You know, it becomes a beautiful garden with, but your own beautiful plants became the weeds.
Right, because they're a little too aggressive.
They seed around. You know, if we have species plants, like we have Stagis, Veronica, they seed around, and Verbena, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's short-lived, so it seeds around like crazy. So we have to pull them out. But I like them so much that we leave some for next year. You know, that we have them all the time.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was most of the questions that came up.
Yeah, I think that was, we've had great interaction today on the call, and thank you both, Janice and Pete, for the time and the conversation here. We will be hopefully following up with everyone afterwards with a recording in case you want to view again. I hope that people watching this today will follow New York Restoration Project on Instagram to stay in touch with our work, or on other social media platforms. You can also sign up for our newsletter on our website. And I hope you want to learn more about our work and that you'll stay in touch with the organization. But thank you again, Janice and Pete. I appreciate you being with us today.
And I just want to say, Pete, on behalf of New York Restoration, not only are we grateful for your time and your work and your efforts in behalf of our beloved city, but we must, when you can travel again, we would love to host you and show you some of the gardens that we've done, and thank you in person.
I admire your work, and I think it's good that it's there. You know, you can bring joy to a lot of people that never would have a garden, in another way. So that is good. And I think that I see a question here about climate change. We cannot just, of course, we work with watering, climate change, everything in mind, but we cannot change the climate by doing the good job, you know. And I think that is, and the plants don't change so quickly that we can use other plants. Just to, if I see quick questions. So that is, so we do our best to make people aware of the beauty of gardens.
Yes, and you push us forward in that, and we will thank you in person, and thank you from our hearts, and from all of us who love to get our hands dirty, and live to garden and to help people change their lives and become aware of it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Pete. Well said.
Thank you.
Right.
Are we going?
Bye-bye.
Very good. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.